Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, Text 23. Tata jasa hata rucha sana jihva sasadvasa murdna durtanjale puta upatasthur adokshajam, by the glaring bodily effulgence, with faded luster, the tongues were silenced by those who had fear of him, and with their head and the hands touched to the head, they prayed to Adoksaja. Now, one of the things that's important to realize is certain positions do matter. So the prayer involved the head and the hands being next to the head. So was this a standing praising position, or was this a prostrating in submission? Text 24. Ape arvag verteyo yasya mahetav atma bhuv adaya yatha mate gnantesma kartanugraha vigraham. It's still beyond the mental activity of those whose glory is as the supreme field of consciousness, and according to the different capacities, they offered prayers that was manifested by the grace of the transcendental form. Now, when deity sends one, then they inform us of the forms of worship for our time. Text 25. Daksho Gurhitarhana Sadanutamam Yajnesvaram Vithvasarjam Param Gurum Sunanda Nandare Anugair Vartam Buddha Karnan Prapade Prayata Kartanjale. Daksha accepted the rightful sacrificial vessel and put it out of the master of all the sacrifices for all the Rajapatas, for the supreme preceptor, and by associates like Sunanda and Nanda, who took great pleasure in surrounding and offering respectable prayers and taking shelter with a subdued mind and folded hands. Text 28. Daksha uvacha sudam svadamne uparata killa udde avastam chinmatram akam abhayam pratishidya mayam tishtams payaeva purushatvam upatyathasya aste bhavan aparisuddha evatma tantra. Daksha said, "You're pure in your own abode, and if you completely turn back mental speculators, because you're completely spiritual, without a second, fearless, and controlling the material energy. And you're situated, certainly as an overseer, and you enter into her that's present with your worldly lordship, even though there's impurity in the worldly, it's as if you're self-sufficient, so deity has no need and therefore is not contaminated by being in everything and everything being in him. Text 27, Vatveja uchu hatavam nate vayam ananjana vura sapat karmane avagraha deyo bhagavan vidama dharmopalakshanam idam privrad advarakyam Shnatam yad artham adidaivam adovyavastah. The priest began to say the truth, and it's not the fault of your lordship that we're such that we haven't been able to stay free from material contamination, by the curse of the mood and fruitive activities, being too attached with such intelligence. So if you get attached to the world for itself, then, worse can creep in, right? The Supreme Personality of God. We know the social order is symbolized thus in the three departments of knowledge: sacrifice, a name known to us, for that matter, for worshiping, entities with arrangements. Now, so there's sacrificial rituals, there's scripture itself, and there's certain shares that are supposed to be distributed when it comes to some of these rituals. But there are different levels of scripture, right? There's the flowery words and the story and all that. Underneath is the commandments and the rituals. But really, we're looking for the spirit of things. You can have all three, but you really need the spirit of the scripture. Text 28. Sadasya uchu udpate advane asrana uru klasa durge nata kogravyalan vishte vishaya marga tarshe atma gahoru bara devandva svabre Khala Marga Bhaya Sukadave Jnasartha Pada Ukas Tesaranada Pada Yate Kamopasrashtah. The members of the assembly said that the repeated birth and death on the path is not something to take shelter in, is greatly troublesome, in a formidable fort that terminates in ferociousness and snakes being infested with material happiness. As a mirage, the body becomes a heavy home and a burden, with the dual ditches of happiness and distress. Ferocious animals are even afraid of the forest fire of lamentation. It's for the interest of rascals. We should seek shelter under your lotus feet, which gives shelter. And when you went, you're afflicted. There's the afflicting by all sorts of desires. Now, the going, you could say, of God means that, that God consciousness, there's a lapse in it. And then that's when problems come in. Text 29. Rudra ulacha tava varada varangrav asishaha kilarthe heate munebir asaktar adaranarhandiya yade rachita deyam mavidya loko pavidam japate naganaya tat tavat parandugrahena. The roaring said, or not roaring, what does Rudra mean? Anyways, you're the supreme benefactor with the precious lotus feet. It's to the desire of the existence of the material world, where there is fulfillment, certainly, by the sages that are liberated, with the worshipable care, with the mind fixed by the ignorant persons, and the unpurified activity they utter without value. When it is by compassion like yours. So, people who don't know, in reference to the sent ones, want to criticize their activity. Like, for example, they think that they should pray, should have been the ones that prayed or did rituals all the time, or shouldn't have had wives, or shouldn't have had, etc., etc. But the actual report of the avatars is like that. Or they just go through the rituals and don't value them for what they are, right? They go over the scriptures and don't value these things for what they are. Text 30. Pargaruvacha yanmaya gahaniya paratatma buddha brahmadayas tanu bhartas tamase svapanta natman sritam tava vedante adunape tattvam suyam prasidatu bhavan pranat atma bandhu. Bargo said, who is insurmountable by the illusory energy, and who has stolen the knowledge of the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord and the embodied living entities, and placed it in the darkness of illusion, and lied down not in the field of the mind in which they should be situated in, but your understanding is certainly now the absolute position. Be kind with this, O you, your lordship, because we are a surrendered soul and a friend. So if we attain to the right beliefs, then, then we can be forgiven for our past, as we like to call it in the West. It's the same thing regardless of the language you use for it. Your past karma is set aside as far as its moral or ultimate import, right? Text 31. Brahmovacha naitat svarupam bhavato sau padarata beda grahaya purusho yavad ikshat Jnanasya charthasya gunasya chasrayo mayamayad vyatirikto matastavam. The Supreme said, this eternal form is not as yours, and that other knowledge is different than that which is acquired by a person, as long as he wants to see the knowledge, and also has that objective of the instruments of knowledge as the basis from being made of material energy, distinct, he regards this of you. And Narayana paro vyaktad andam avyakta sambhavam. Sankaracharya said, the original material cause is beyond the material manifestation, and it's the cause of the material world. So, the Supreme Personality, Narayana, the sort of the full, in terms of the tarot, it's not in the system, it's not outside the system. That's what Narayana is. And so there's a causal, basically. And the causal is not creation. Text 32. Indra uvacha eram ape uchyuta visva bhavanam vapur ananda karam manodarsam sura vidvit kshapanayir udayudayir puja dandayir upapannam ashtabeh. The King of Heaven said that certainly this is the infallible one for the welfare of the universe. This transcendental form has caused pleasure to the mind and the eye, where there's the envious of the devotees, and the punishment with the uplifted weapons, with the arms possessed of 8. So this was the 8-armed form. So the Quran has some passages like that too. It's a blessing and a healing for those who believe, and it's a curse and a punishment for those who don't. And so it's not that God is like, okay, these are the people we want to go to. It's like people made the choice what sort of afterlife and stuff that they have put for themselves. Text 33. Patnya uchu yajno yantava yajanaya kanna sarsto vidvastah pasupatinadya daksha kupat tamnas tavam sava sayanabba santa medam yajnatman nalena rucha dursa kunihe. The wives of the executors of the sacrifice said that the sacrifice where you're worshiping is arranged by the Supreme, and it was devastated by Pasupatina. So we uncover through some of these references who was representing who, are at least presumed to be, right? And today, from the anger of Daksha, it's that there's these dead bodies of ours, and it's like we're the still sacrificial animals. O Lord of the sacrifice, beautiful and lotus-like, by the vision of your eyes, you sanctify. And as much as we can say that that prophetic figures and stuff are, their histories and stuff sanctifies the pilgrimage sites and all that sort of stuff, it's actually deity that decides that. So deity looks with favor, as it's called, and then, text 34, Risheya uchu ananvitam te bhagavan vicheshtitam yaratmana charase karma najyase vibhuteya yata upasedur isvarim namanyate svayam anuvartatim bhavan. The sages prayed, acknowledging the wonder of the Divine Personality and his activities, which by potencies are carried out, and certainly these activities are not things attached to. For mercy, for whom worshipped, and the fortunate controller aren't attached, but yourself is to your obedient servant as your lordship. And so we don't really know the essence of deity, right? But we know qualities. And qualities are shown through certain individuals and forms and all that. So we attain mercy by certain other beings because, these things are means. But as a sage, you should understand, the acausal of the acausal, right? You should have that concept. Text 35. Siddha uchu ayam davat katha marshta piyusha nadyam manovarana klasa davagne dagdah tersharto vagado na sasmara davam na nishkramate brahma sampannavan nah. The Siddhas prayed in reference to these pure pastimes of the nectar, as nectar in the river of the mind. Like an elephant in its sufferings by the forest fire, being burnt with thirst and afflicted, it immerses itself. It doesn't remember the forest fire or the miseries, and it doesn't come out. The Absolute is like that, having merged with us. And, when we subsist in the consciousness in God, as it's called, then, it's like, the bad things that happened didn't happen. And text 36. Yajamame uvacha svagatam te prasidasa tubhyam nama srinivasa sreya kanteya trahena tavamrate disa nangayar maka subate sirsha hina kabando yatha purusha. The wife of Daksha prayed and was pleased by your auspicious appearance. One of the things about mystical experiences is you let them encourage you towards further mysticism. My dear controller, unto you I offer respectful remembrance. With the O noble abode of fortune, with nobility as your wife that protects us, and you're without these bodily limbs as the supreme controller. And you're, not confined to the sacrificial arena, which is beautiful and headless. Oh. Well, it's like the beauty that isn't such without the head and possessed only the body as a person. Okay, that's something a little bit different. But basically, like when you despiritualize stuff, it almost entirely loses its value. That's one of the ways to think of that sort of stuff. And the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya 3:11 says, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jate Sastram Japas Tapa Apranasya Eva Dehasya Mandanam Loka Ranjanam. When a friend or relative dies, they decorate the body, and but the life force is gone with it, and there's no value. So this verse that we went over talks about how if we don't have that devotion to deity, and we don't have an understanding of the pervading, any civilization advancement is as if it has no value. Text 37. Loka pala uchu drshta kimno dragber asad graha estavam pratyag drashta drshyata yana visvam maya he esha bhavadiya he buman yastvam shasta panchabir base bhutae. The planetary governors said, whether it's seen by us in a material sense or it's revealed in a cosmic sense, you're the inner witness that is seen by the universe and the material world, because you're certainly the possessor of this universe. Because you are as the sixth with the five, that appear with the elements. So fire, air, earth, and water, or whatever order that's in. And you got soul or spirit, but there's something beyond that, right? Text 38. Yogesvara uchu prayanate nyoste amutastvaye prabhu visvatmanikshan na prthag ya atmana athape bhaktyasa tayo padavatam ananya vratyanugrahana vatsala. The great mystics said that this non-difference with one another is from that in you, my dear Lord, and the supersoul of the consciousnesses, and seeing not a difference with who in the consciousnesses, there's so much more devotion, O controller, with it, of those who worship without failing, and they're favored, O favorable Lord. Now, it's important for us to realize that some experiences don't define who is more favored than others. Text 39. Jagarud Baba Stete Leyashu Daevato Bahu Bedyamana Unayatma Mayaya Rachitatma Beda Mateya Svasam Sataya Vinivarteta Brahma Gunatmane Nama. The material world has its creation, maintenance, and annihilation, which is destined with many variegations by the material qualities and the consciousness energy that's produced in the living entities who produce different inclinations by their internal potency and the cause to stop in interaction with certain material modes. Unto him, in personal form, they offer obeisances. And, of course, they're not supposed to have any false identifications. Text 40. Brahmo Vacha Namaste Srita Satvaya Dharma Dinam Cha Suteya Nirgunaya Shayat Kashtam Naham Vedapare Techa. The Supreme said, mentioning you as a shelter of the quality of goodness, or thinking about that anyways, of all religion, austerity, and penance, and as the source that is transcendental, the qualities, and of whom the situation I don't know, and certainly others don't know. So, again, we are in the realm of qualities, so we can't really understand these things that transcend that. Like the creator of time, space, and matter. That's an odd thing, right? But only in the causal sense is that odd. Text 41. Agne uvacha yat teja saham susamidna teja havyam vahe svadvara ajya siktam tam yajneyam pancha vedam cha panchabe svishtam yajurbe pranatosme yajnam. The fire entity said, by whose effulgence I am as luminous as blazing fire, and accept the offerings and the sacrifices mixed with the butter, and the protector of the sacrifices, 5 types, and by the 5 is the worship with the Vedic hymns and the offering of respect. I sacrifice. And one hymn, Asravayate Chaturaksharam Astu Sraushad Ete Chatur Aksharam Yajete Dvabyam Yayajamaha. It is important that things are done according to the revealed and the inspired sense, and that's part of the reason why some things are not done so much anymore, and people do stuff like chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, because with chants like that, it sort of represents them all. And honestly, you do what you can do, and who can't do that? Text 42. Deva uchu pura kalpa paya savakritam udari kritya vikritam vam nivradyas tasmin salela uragendra desayane Human sasha siddhair hardevim rasita dhyatma parave saevadyakšnor yahathe chaurase bhrtyanavasinah. The light beings said with formality at the devastation of the age due to the self-production drawn with the stomach that has its effect. You certainly are original in that. In the water, on the heavenly snake, on the bed, the personality, you take rest. So the sasha is rest by the liberated entities. In the heart, you think on them, on the path of this philosophical speculation. He certainly is now both eyes on the path, and you move with the servants that protect us. And certainly we can witness some things through these ways, and now there's some interesting metaphors there, right? And the word snake doesn't show up, but people are familiar with Sesha as a snake. Text 43. Gandharva uchu amsamsas tereva mariche areya ete brahmandranya devagana rudra puroga krida bandam visvam eram yasya vibhuman Asmaya Nityam Nata Namaste Paravama. The Gandharvas said that the parts and parcels of your body are as the light beings and Marchi and other great sages, and that which is headed by the principle of Brahma and Indra and various light beings, and that headed by Rudra, and this whole creation is comparatively a plaything. And this is of whom is supremely, almightily great, and unto him always we take as Lord with respectful obeisances, and unto you we make the offering. And Krishnas tu Bhagavan Svayam, the all-attractive, is the personality of God, and is the only, so whatever name we use is actually, text 44, Vidyadhara Uchu Tavanmaya Yartham Abhipadya Kavavarismin Kartva Mamaham Ete Durmatir Udpathaya Savaya Shipto Pe Asad Vishaya Lalasa Atma Moham Yushmat Kathamratan Shavaka Udvyudasyat. The Vidaras said, we keep on having person or group giving their testimony. By your external potency, the human body, after obtaining in the body, they've misidentified in this, and thus they're ignorant of the person that I am, or you're ignorant of the I am, which is themselves. By the wrong roads, by the one's belongings, they're distracted. Even temporary happiness in sensual things, and the illusion that they have the delusions in their field of consciousness. But the topics can be relished like nectar from a long distance, and that can be delivering. So deliverance, again, is through the change of your consciousness. It's not something that somebody else does for you. It's that your consciousness, your actions, your spiritual impetus, because you want to go beyond the sense of, oh, it's just the mind and the body. No, it's the whole thing. Text 45. Brahmana uchu tvam kratus tvam havis tvam hutasa svayam tvam he mantra samidarba patranicha tvam sarasyartvijo dampati devata agnihotram svada summa ajyam pasuh. The priestly class said that your sacrifice is the offering of clarified butter to your fire that personifies you. Well, it's a symbol. Just like prayer directions are a symbol for your chants, as we fuel the kusa grass in the sacrificial pots, and you're as the members of the assembly, the priests, the chief persons of the sacrifice of the wife, the people say demagogues, but the aspects of the qualities that can be linked to the angelic portions, right, of the sacrificial fire ceremony, and the offering that regard the forefathers, and the soma, and the clarified butter, and the sacrificial animals. Now, there's a lot of comments about, oh no, sacrificial animals, people aren't qualified to do that anymore. Well, it's not just something you do, right? You don't say, oh, well, there's a ritual where we can kill animals, so we go off and do this ritual where you kill an animal. And people do what they think is a lot worse than that, or a lot more obviously, whatever. But our reaction, our interaction with the material world, our reaction to it, that's part of our service to God. So it's like when you give charity, it's in a way as if you're giving charity to God. But then again, God doesn't have the need. But text 46. Tvam puragam rasaya maha sukarodam straya padminim varanendro yata stuyamano naro lileya yogibir Vyuja Artha Trayigatra Yajna Kratu. In the past, you were the earth from within the water, and the great boar and with your tusk, a lotus, elephant-like, and as that, offering prayers very easily, are the great sages that pick up the personification of Vedic knowledge, and they have the form of the sacrifice. And so again, we're even known that, we don't have dogs and some other forms listed, but certainly things are known. And any animal that teaches a lesson can be thought of in this way. So, long ago, God was known through a boar, and they say that the world was picked up from the water, like an elephant picks up a lotus flower, and then there was the vibrating of it with the sound. People talk about the Schumann resonance and how that has changed. And Then there was the sacrificial hymns, and then sages hear these hymns and verses and all that, and they do more rituals and stuff with it. They at least meditate, and it becomes something more than just the bare letter. And I know some of this isn't literally true about how our world works, but again, you can maybe understand the broader reference. Text 47. Sa prasida tavam asmakam akankashatam darsanam te paribrashta sat karmanam kirtyamane nirbir namne yajnasate yajna vigna kshayam yante tasmaya nama. And that same person who is pleased by you awaits upon us as your audience that has fallen down of those who perform the sacrifice. There is a chanting by the persons of your holy name, controller of the sacrifice, because even if we have intentions to do all this stuff, still, there's divine will whether or not it's going to happen. And they attain their obstacles of destruction through the respectful obeisances. And so basically it's a prayer because people were unable to perform what they wanted to perform. And when it's such great good things, it's as if one has actually fallen. But we need to step away from that idea that if we're prevented from stuff, either people do stuff that affects our condition, or they actually physically stop us from doing things, that we're not fallen from being stopped from that. Or maybe we don't have the resources. Text 48. Maitreya uvacha ete daksha kabir yajnam badra gura bimarsitam kirtyamane harshikase saninye yajna bhavane. Maitreya said, for this reason, O Daksha, who was purified in consciousness with the sacrifice, O Vidura, was devastated by the Rabadra, was glorified because the Hrishikesa, what does that mean? Arranged for restarting because he was the protector of sacrifice. And Hrishikesha, okay, we're not finding any of the terms here, or maybe we are. No, we're not. Text 49. Bhagavan Savanna Bhagana Sarvatma Sarva Bhaga Bhuk Daksham Babasha Abashya Priyamana Ivananga. The Supreme Personality, with his own, had the share of the super soul of all the living, and enjoyed the results of all sacrifices. Daksha said, as he addressed, that he was satisfied because of the attitude of sinlessness in Vidura. And text 50, Sri Bhagavandu Vachaham Brahmacha Sarvascha Yagata Karanam Param Atmesva Atmesvara Upadrashta Svayam Darg Avis Ashana. The Supreme Personality nobly said that I, the Brahma and Shiva, are supreme over the material manifestation. So over material, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are terms we think of, right? And cause it as the supreme super soul. And I'm the witness, and I'm self-sufficient, and there's no difference. There is generally a thought, by whatever name you call them, right? Text 51. And to nail down this point in another way, Sarvam Kalavidam Brahma. Everything is Brahma. Well, or everything is so connected to Brahma because Vishnu, as the maintainer, well, nothing exists unless it has the permission of the all-pervading, the all-maintaining. Text 51. Atma mayam samavisya soham grunam mayim vidya sarjan rakshan haran visvam dadre samjanam kreyo chittam. My energy enters myself. I'm composed of the modes of material nature. O twice born one. I create, I maintain, I annihilate the cosmic manifestation. I cause to be born. And I name according to the activity. And so we know God through those different names that vary. But anything worthwhile, any power, or anything that exists, again, is with permission. So in a way, these things become divine names, right? Text 52. Tasmin Brahmane Advitiya Kevale Paramatmane Brahma Rudrau Chabutane Verenajno Nupasyate. He's the supreme without second. He's one super soul. Both Brahma and Rudra and the living creation, the living entities are separate, but one is not properly conversant, thinks them as separate as in that they can escape presence, right? Well, I'm throwing words for things. The living entities aren't independent is basically how the verse ends. But they are their own beings, it's just they're not. Text 53. Yatha pumanna savangashu serah pane adeshu kvachit parakya buddhim kurute evam bhutashu matpara. As a person who's not in his own body, between the heads and the hands and other parts of the body, sometimes he makes differentiation, and thus among living entities is my devotee. And, well, the devotee is not to certainly you regard the situation, as it's called in Arabic, taqiyya, but you realize it's all opportunity for divine service, or for your true purpose, or whatever, however you're going to phrase it, right? Text 54. Treyanam eka bhavanam yuna pasyate vaye bedam sarva bhutatmanam brahman sasantim adegachate. Of the three, they have one nature. One who doesn't see, certainly, focuses on the separateness of the supersoul of all living entities. O priest, then they realize the peace, because they realize that there's sort of a non-dual aspect, and then they have their peace. But if you don't consider deity as separate and conflicting entities and that sort of stuff, then you also have peace. There's the achintya beda tattva, simultaneous oneness and difference, as it's called. Text 55. Maitreya guvacha evam bhagavatadishta prajapate patir harim architva kratuna savena devan ubayato yajat. Maitreya said thus: by the Supreme Personality of God, having been instructed, the head of the Prajapatis, after worshipping the potency with the sacrificial ceremonies and his own light beings separately, worshipped. Text 56. Rudram cha svena bhagena he upadavat samahita karmanudavasanena sumapan etaran ape udavasya saharta vigbe sasnav avavratham tata. Rudra, at his own share, since he was being worshipped, with concentrated mind, made the performance and finished the acts of the entities of the soma. And soma's opium, ephedra, and marijuana, but it's also a reference to consciousness and possible and flygark and some other plants, you could say. Maybe it's a type of thing. And there's, other than that, even after the finishing, along with the priest, they bathe the bath then. So sometimes bathing after a ritual is important, but you do it beforehand too. And sacrifices and feasting, yeah, you may want to bathe after. Text 57. Before we get into that, the Savena Bhagena is the remnants of the sacrifices that are distributed. Text 57. Tasma ape anubhavena savena eva vapta radase dharma eva matim dattava tridasas tedevam yayu. Unto him, even by worshipping the Supreme by his own, certainly attain perfection in the social order, and certainly with intelligence that he was given, he went to the places of those demagogues, and by that we mean the light beings. And text 58 are the quality realms, the Lahut, the Absolute, as it's called in the West. Text 58. Avam dakshayani hitva sati purva kalevaram jajne himavata kshetre menayam ite susruma. Thus, the daughter of Daksha, after giving up her former body, Sati was born of the Himalayas, and the wife, Mena. Thus I've heard. Well, you don't have to be reincarnated ancestors to manifest the qualities that they left behind, or be considered as a rebirth of those. Text 59. Tameva dayatam bhuya avrankte patim ambeka ananya bhava eka gatim sakte subtava purusham. And certainly Ambika was beloved again and accepted as her husband without attachment to others, the one goal, and the marginal and external feminine energies that were dormant as the masculine. So that whole Shakti and Shiva dance idea, right? Parasya Saktir Vividaiva Sruyate. And we realize these different varieties of energies through feminine and masculine things that are heard about. Text 60. Atad Bhagavata Sambho Karma Dakshadvara Druha Srutam Bhagavatach Cheshyad Udavan Me Burhaspate. Thus, the possessor of all opulences, of Sambhu. Okay, so this is the story of who devastated the sacrifice of Daksha, and we've heard it from the devotee of the great, from the disciple, from Uddhava, by me of Brahaspati. This is important to follow out those narration chains. Text 61. Edam pavitram param isa chash tetam yas asyam ayushyam angauga marshanam yunityada karmya narondu kirtayad dunote angam kaurava bhakte bhavata. And this, which is the pastime of the controlled, is supremely pure, and its fame will have a long duration, and it destroys the sins of those after hearing it as a person, and they should narrate it, and they should clear off the material consciousness, O descendant of Kuru, with faith and devotion. And so that ends that chapter, and 8 is quite a long one. But let us remember that we need examples. And so it's not just listing off commandments and all that. And if that works for you, still, it helps sometime to have these examples to look towards. Now, there's the best of examples, and then there's also from the communities